What's going on, everyone? Phantom139 here, and today we've got something a little different. Also, hello, it's me. Today I wanted to share a video on something near and dear to me, which is my thoughts on the current state of Destiny 2. Now, I've been involved with quite a few posts on Reddit and the forums in the past, but I think it's kind of actually more in tune to actually share my thoughts on the title right now and what I think could be improved with the title. So I put together this kind of a script that I want to follow and to share my thoughts on what I think could go better with the title and things that should happen for the future of the game, especially seeing as there's more titles coming out in the very near future. So first and foremost, I want to talk about what I would call the overall state of the game, or how the game feels as a whole right now. And honestly, what I have to say about that is that it feels really bland. Like there's nothing to really do or go after. Sure, they have the pinnacle weapons for Gambit or Strikes or Crucible, but those really aren't what I would call long-term pursuits. The long-term pursuits in the game right now are things like titles, and there's some blaring problems with them that need to be thought on and improved a bit. So we're going to talk about that today, as well as some other things that I think Bungie could do to actually make these long-term pursuits more meaningful, or to improve the state of the game as a whole. So, as I mentioned, long-term pursuits are for the most part non-existent. There's nothing really to keep players coming back to the game, even with the whole promise of something new every week that Black Armory was supposed to do. So really, at this point, I think the game has kind of devolved into a Tuesday comes around, you sign in, you reset, you do your 1 to 3 activities, maybe you do your raids, and then you put the game down. That doesn't really feel like a game that's in good health. It's more or less a sign of, well, I just want to get this done, and then I'm done for the week. So players really aren't engaging with the content that I think Bungie meant to set out to make for long-term, let's stick around and keep the players engaged with the title. And with other titles around like Anthem and Division 2, I think there needs to be some drastic adjustments, and very soon. On the second topic, there really isn't something new every week. Yeah, we had the last word quest, but I'm going to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of that. I'm mainly a PvE player, so of course I'm going to say that it was a PvP quest, but who cares? Plus, why are people really getting excited over old content? We've had Last Word in Destiny 1 for 3 years prior to this, and there isn't really anything new to it. It's the same gun, it does the same thing. And about the only thing I could really commend Bungie for here is the last mission. The mechanics are really interesting, and I definitely applaud the team for trying to at least be inventive in those regards, but this kind of worries me for the annual pass as a whole. If they're trying to resell those old exotics with a new coat of paint, then are we really going to give into this? I mean, I know the whole split with Activision was a thing, and good on Bungie for you guys, but can we at least tone down things a bit now that this has happened? Anything that was in Destiny 1 should be given out to all players. Like, I honestly believe that Last Word Quest should be available for everyone. But, again, that's just me. But I don't think you should be out here calling it new content or something new when it's really the same thing we've been doing for a while. Also, forges. They were interesting at first, but like everything else, they got dull, and they got dull really quickly. They're very repetitive, and it's honestly the same horde mode that we've been attuned to. There isn't anything to kind of change it up. Yes, they made it this really big rush, get it done as quickly as possible, but if you think about it, we're really doing the same thing, and the only kind of gating that was on this activity was the power level, and those had to get changed because people couldn't do it the first week. Next up, the new weapons from Black Armory. They really don't feel that special to me. They're kind of just the same thing. The things we've already had, but hey, random rolls are back, right? Woo! There's nothing new about them. There was no special perks to hunt on them. There was no special things that made these weapons completely unique from everything else in the sandbox. Sure, they had the effects for the Black Armory radiances, and you could also see the symbols through the scopes on certain weapons, but those really aren't new or innovative for me. And this kind of makes me really worried for Season of the Drifter and subsequently Season of the Shadow, which is the summer expansion. We've heard nothing about this so far, and I honestly believe we're about 2 to 3 weeks out from it now. And if this is going to be another repeat of Black Armory in terms of the amount of new and repetitive content, we've got a problem. and things will go downhill really quickly for this game if that's the case. So that's kind of my thoughts on the overarching state of things. It feels kind of bland, like there's nothing exciting to do. So let's actually dive into the individual problems and talk about how they can be fixed. So first and foremost, there's the double blocking progression system, and this makes the game's grind feel absolutely unnecessary to me. And what I mean by this is the fact that there's RNG drops as well as weekly lockouts. Now, this is kind of in place to make the power progression actually a climb, and that part feels good. The announced change to make bounties capped at seasonal power, good decision, I like that. The removal of ethereal keys from Last Wish, however, that is not a good decision. You're actually taking drops from people away from them, and I don't think that was a good move. I think the better thing you could have done here was create a brand new set of Last Wish gear that comes out with Season of the Drifter, has a higher cap at 700 power, and then you just leave the previous gear capped at 650, and then you sort out the whole how do you get the old gear back if you want it again later. Honestly, I think the big point that we need to talk about today is the fact that the weekly lockout system is something that needs to go from the game. Like, you gotta get rid of it. And we'll talk more about what I think needs to happen for this later. Additionally, the RNG system for titles, the collection badges that everyone's been having so much trouble filling out, that needs to be a change that happens now. You can't wait 6 more months until year 3 comes around to remove those badges from the title rewards. Get rid of them. So that's the problem with the double blocking progression system. So this kind of suits the whole overall state of the game. Now I want to kind of branch out a bit and talk about some recent things that happened to the game and things that should happen. So first and foremost, we have to get one of the big elephants out of the room, which is the sandbox changes that happened recently. So as we all know, the sandbox changes came into effect with the patch last week, and I honestly think that some of those changes were needed, especially with the whole powering up supers that haven't been used. But unfortunately, there are some other things in here that really feels like Bungie pushed the big red nerf button in response to what we all call PvP tiers. Now, Nova Warp did need an adjustment for the Crucible. I do not deny that at all. There was some problems with it, but the fact that you completely destroyed the super just for the sake of pleasing some people who only play Crucible, that was not a good move. I think what really needed to happen with Warp is you needed to fix 2 problems. First, there was the issue with the super being able to hit people through walls. That's just a simple line of sight check. I've done modifications for games before. It's really easy to make that mistake. It's also really easy to fix it. The other thing is the damage of the super was a bit too high, especially when you're talking about super versus super. You could have simply just toned the dial down just a knob, just so it couldn't one-hit kill another super. Everything else about that super was fine, but now that you've made the duration changes, you made the charge up changes, and you reduced the damage, basically took a 3-prong fork and stuck it in that super and doesn't even feel like a super anymore. So I asked the question, why are we still doing this? Everyone cannot deny that Destiny has been and always will be a PvE-centric title. This was not sold as a PvP game. It will never be a PvP game. So I'm going to tell you, stop treating it like one. This goes for every big name streamer and every big name commenter out there. It is not going to be the next esports title. It's time for you to accept that truth. The power fantasy of this game is the thing that drives exciting moments. There needs to be a top of the tier. And the fact that we've been kicking down the tier every time just to justify someone's tiers that I can't adapt to this in PvP, 15% of your game, that's ruining the game. All you're doing by doing this is grinding the wheel that we already went through with the first title that brought us to year 1 of Destiny 2, and we all remember how much of a train wreck that was. We do not want to go back to that. Now, that's not to say that this entire patch was bad. Like I said, there was actually quite a few things in there that I liked. Golden Gun changes, Burning Mold changes, and Nova Bombs, absolutely fantastic. Great job there. Please keep that up. There's also been buffs to weapons that have been sitting in my vault for quite a while now. So Legend of Acarius changes. That gun feels a lot better now. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'll give you a thumbs up on that one. Please keep it up. The things I didn't really like, well, we already talked about Nova Warp. Changes to Blade Barrage didn't really feel like a change, per se. I mean, you can jump into Mayhem right now, and what's the thing you see? Blade Barrage is in charge of Galanor everywhere. It's still the same thing. They didn't really adjust it at all. Also, the fact that there was a complete disregard to supers that were in desperate needs of tuning, talking about Stormtrance and Word of Dawn, it would have been a great opportunity to bring up some of these supers. And honestly, the so-called buff to Stormtrance, I honestly view that as the worst buff in the history of all of Destiny. You might not as even, honestly, there was really no point to even put that in the patch notes. That's how bad of a buff it was. Now, some things that I think were missed from this update that really should have happened. There's been a lot of exotics that have been sitting around that honestly don't even feel like they're powerful enough to compete with other tools. I'm talking about most of the Year 1 exotics. The situation with PvE right now is that you're either using an exotic heavy or you're underperforming. That needs to be fixed. You need to bring up some of the other exotic weapons or introduce some legendary heavies that can compete with some of the exotic weapons to make people want to branch out a bit. Also, exotic armor has been kind of sitting on the back burner for a while. I think it's time to do another patch or another pass on those to make sure that they are in line with the other ones. I'm thinking we need more things like geomag stabilizers for other classes, or just make all exotic armor feel like that kind of powerful. You want to make people actually want to go out and get those pieces. Alright, so that's enough about sandbox stuff. I don't really like talking about that stuff. As you can tell, it's a very heated topic, but we're about to go into another one, which is the RNG in this game, and I'm talking about loot rewards and titles. So this is the big elephant in the room discussion point for my current thoughts on the state of the game. It's a system that people either love or hate. I know there are people out there who will adamantly defend it, and there was others who are going to be cheering me on because I'm actually bringing this up and saying, yeah, keep it up, keep it up. This is absolutely right. The way I see it, there are two types of players in Destiny. You're either granted the hand of Lady Luck and you get absolutely everything handed to you on a silver platter, or you're going to be kicked into the drain week after week after week. Everyone knows what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about things like the Dreaming City cosmetics, the Last Wish Ship, Sparrow and Ghost Shell, 1000 Voices, Anarchy, Always on Time. These are your notorious offenders, and I will admit, I have been on the downside for 3 of these for the past 6 weeks. It doesn't feel good. Now, don't get me wrong, we need RNG in the game. This kind of envelops the whole process of a looter shooter game. But we need something to combat bad RNG. The problem here is that Destiny kind of dishes this out with a two-pronged fork. First, the game has these incredibly low drop rates on these items. I'm talking about 5% here. So if you think about it, you complete an encounter, you get a 5% at that drop. Your chances don't go up like people have said that they do. That's only affecting things like Nightfall Strikes. It doesn't affect these cosmetics in particular, so it's 5% every time. The other problem is the weekly lockout system. Now, this was a system that was introduced in Destiny 1, and it was meant to hinder the power climb, but if you think about it, power climb at this point only really affects the first week or 2 of a DLC. We are kind of beyond that point now. Most players have already reached 650 or will be within a week of getting there. I honestly think that this is really the main problem with the game. As a looter shooter, you want people engaged with the title, as in to say the grind. Well, the weekly lockout basically caps the amount of grind you can do per week. So this problem says you only get 3 chances a week to earn rewards. And this is subjective. 3 chances only happens if you have 3 characters. Not everyone has time for 3 characters. And it gets even better. If those 3 characters are not of all different classes, you're locked out there too. So if you try to play 2 hunters, you're actually only getting 2 chances a week. And that's assuming that your 3rd character is not a hunter. So this is something that needs to change. And that's not even worse of it. You want to talk about the Dreaming City ship, Palace Galliot? Assuming you have 3 characters, that's 3 chances every 3 weeks, because the Shattered Throne's only around then. You miss out on the drop, you have to wait another 3 weeks. So I can understand that Bungie wants to keep people's interest focused on these rare drops, keep you grinding the wheel. But the problem is that the more times people do the same things and get nothing, the more often you're burning people out. So I got Cursebreaker 3 weeks ago. I finally got the Dreaming City to drop. It was that ship that was holding me back. But you would think that the initial reaction of getting that would be a celebratory cheer, but I'm going to admit that's not what happened at all. In fact, the exact words that came out of my mouth, fucking finally. Now, Bungie, do you really want people to say that, or do you want them to be screaming, oh my god, I got a Galahorn, for instance? This was a complete and utmost slog, and that's not good. You don't want people getting angry at the fact that they're not getting a drop. I've seen people post on the Reddit that it's taken them upwards of 50, 60, even 70 tries to get a certain drop from a raid. That's not good. You want your rare rewards to excite players, but they also need to be reasonably within reach. So the problem here is that this title system that you created to kind of show off people who are really skilled, it's no longer a measure of skill, but it's just a measure of who's got better RNG luck, who's got Lady Luck's favor, from my example here. So I think the best course of action here is to turn Destiny into a true RPG sense, or the true looter-shooter element. And I think you need to take elements of Borderlands 2 and The Division in terms of these rare rewards. So here's my suggestion for this. First and foremost, you retain weekly lockouts, but this weekly lockout system will only apply to powerful gear drops. So basically, let's say I run Last Wish. I do Kali on the character. If I run Kali on the character a second time, I no longer get a powerful drop. But I can do activities again, they will just drop at soft cap power. So let's say, same example, I run Kali once, I get a, let's say, what's the thing that drops there, Age-Old Bond? So let's say I get a 650 Age-Old Bond from the first time I run it. And then let's say I run it again and I get the curated Age-Old Bond. Well, that would only be at 630 power. So you get my point here. You can do activities over and over again at this point. So basically think your Black Armory system, your Nightfall Strikes. You can run them over and over again. You still have a chance at the rare drop there. I'm just saying take the whole activities that are supposed to be weekly in nature and make them actually repeatable. I think exotics should still be allowed to continue to grant power increases. The reason that this is the case is if you think about raids and like 1000 Voices in Anarchy, people who are running raids are already at max power or within striking distance of it. So what's the point of locking power out there? Additionally, I think what you should do here is kind of use this as an opportunity to bridge the gap of players who haven't done the content yet and players who would like to do the content. And by doing this, the suggestion I have here is to make it so that if you're taking a player through a raid and they've never completed the raid before, that the fire team that has done it gets extra reward drops. So basically you're saying, here, you're helping this player, here's some extra rewards, thanks for helping this person out. So this will, I think, expand the pool of people who want to participate in the end game. So raids, Nightfall Strikes, all that good stuff. Give people more rewards for helping out, and then they will actually want to do that. So that kind of is my thought on RNG in this game, loot rewards and titles. I think the problem here is that the weekly lockout system, it's very dated at this point, and it's something that I think you need to drop. And drop it probably, if you can, early Season 6. I know it'll take time to write this update, but it's something that really needs to happen, in my opinion. Next up, let's talk about the older content in the game, so year one content. Bungie's really sitting on a gold mine in terms of the fact that people aren't interested in the game. They already have a lot of content that they could basically bring up to year 2 values, so why not take your old year 1 content and revamp it for year 2? Right there, you just inject a huge amount of content into the game, get players back on the wheel, for instance. So Leviathan, Infinite Forest, Escalation Protocol. You got 3 big activities right there that you could redo pretty quickly. So Leviathan, I want to talk a little more about that later because I have a bit on raids I want to talk about, but adding a year 2 version at year 2 power I think is a good idea. Please turn back on guided games if you're doing this. You want to have people help other people, give them the mode that lets them do that. Obviously this will mean making year 2 versions of the gear. If you need to make a new coat of paint for it or something to make it unique, that's fine. I mean, don't waste too much time doing this. You're just wanting to get people back on the wheel. But obviously, random rolls was important to Forsaken, so random rolls will be needed on this gear. Infinite Forest. This one at first was going to be a bit tougher to think about until you did the Halloween event this year. And now the fix for the Infinite Forest is right in front of you. Take your Haunted Forest mode and make it a permanent mode on the Mercury map. But change it to be less Halloween themed in nature. So basically put a node on the Mercury map where Infinite Forest Gateway is, call it something like Forest Incursion. Plays the same way as Haunted Forest does, but normal lighting, non-Halloween theme. So basically take those nightmares and replace them with like giant minotaurs, for instance. You call them like Forest Sentinels. And then what you'll do is you'll take the Curse of Osiris gear, revamp it to your 2 values, and then you'll introduce these brand new mods that you can drop from inside this activity. They'll be a rare drop, but they will grant the same bonuses as the Halloween masks did, so you can use them in the new Infinite Forest activity. Additionally, what I think you should do here is make special materials drop from inside this activity, and then you can take these materials to Vance and trade them for the year 2 prophecy boxes that you can then take to the forge, do the little lighting effect or whatever, and you can forge your own year 2 prophecy weapons and armor. I think that'd be a really cool system. Give it a little pizzazz or a flash, make it interesting looking. And then we have Escalation Protocol. Now, going along with that whole bad RNG luck, I think there's something you should do right away. Take your key chest system, make it spawn 2 chests at the end of wave 7. 1 chest gives you armor, 1 chest gives you a weapon. Let people choose which reward they want. And then also have the boss just spit out its random loot engrams, but also put the armor in there so, if people want to keep grinding it in a week, you can grind your full set of armor or weapons, but it might take you a while to do that. But hey, people will be engaged in that. Now, also make a year 2 version of Escalation Protocol here. And I think the way you do this is have it so whenever a player that is 580 power or higher starts it, it kicks off the year 2 version of it. So it'll be higher level enemies, new bosses if you want, and then obviously new weapons and armor. So perfect opportunity for the mystical Ikelos version 1.02, for instance, or 2.01. Just kind of, differentiate them from others. So that's what I think should be done for the old content. Bring them up to year 2 values, make them interesting, and give people something to chase in the game. You want people engaged in the long term, well, you need to actually have the content to support this long-term goal. Next up, I'm going to finish off with a short bit on raids. Now, there's probably a lot I could talk about in a video for raids, but I just want to summarize a few key points here. So first and foremost, if you're going to update the raids, I think you should have Benedict and Ada sell raid banners. You can make Benedict sell those for Callus tokens, Ada one like the Black Armory schematics, and this is just to branch out, and especially if you're updating Leviathan, people who don't own Forsaken, let them purchase the banners for the tokens. That way they can at least participate in that. So for each raid, let's talk about things that you should do. Leviathan, bring this up to your 2 power. That's first and foremost. If you want to do the same thing you did with Age of Triumph for hard mode only, be my guest. My only feedback point would be for the raid layers for the year 2 power, drop the curated loadout system. This was something that the community was pretty vocal against when you announced it, and you still did it anyways. I only did prestige year 1 raid layers like once for Spire and 4 times for Eater. That's how much I didn't like the system. So get rid of it. Obviously put raid banners in the year 2 version. Obviously we want people using them. Make a new collection badge or a new title for people to show that, hey, I've done Leviathan. And then kind of a theme that I'm going to say for all of the weapons and armor is that I know that Bungie mentioned that they wanted to avoid the whole power of armor being better, so they went to mods. But really, making the raid armor differentiate from the rest is a very important aspect of the game. So I don't think making the armor do that is that important, but the weapons should definitely be unique and special. So the Leviathan weapons should come preloaded with Leviathan related perks like Cabal Slayer, or do more damage while on the Leviathan, or getting kills with this weapon while on Leviathan, generate ammo in a different slot, or things like that. Make it important to the Leviathan itself. So it's like, if I'm going to do a Leviathan activity, well, I want to bring my raid weapons with me because they're going to be useful there. Next up, the mods that you get from these raids. Please make them more interesting. 25% damage with X element type. That's great, but where's the pizzazz? There's nothing special about that. Things like altering mechanic time limits or making you better when doing mechanics, that would be interesting. So rehash it, make them better, take the existing armor and give it a new coat of paint if you have to, but just year 2ify the Leviathan basically to make it more fun. Next up, Last Wish. There are a lot of Last Wish weapons that I honestly shard as soon as I get them. Transfiguration, Mage, Apex Predator, Techian Force. They are terrible. Please buff them. These are laughable weapons that I honestly can't shard faster. So they need something to make them special. And I think what you should do with those is, again, take the whole raid-specific weapon perks and make them a default part of them. Or add some unique perks that can only roll on these weapons to make people actually want to go out and get them. Additional raid, weapon, and armor mods. Sure, Taken Spec was cool, but yeah, 7.5% damage to Taken. Whoop-de-doo. Why not make damage against bosses or suppress Taken abilities? That would be a really cool raid mod. And probably the one thing that I would be more than willing to take salt for here, fix the Riven fight. I don't care how many people throw salt at me for this, but if you're avoiding the mechanics of the fight, you are breaking the spirit of the raid activity. You're not even doing the raid it was intended to be done anymore, and honestly, I don't believe that you have merited a completion of the raid. Now, I have suggested a few fixes from this in the past, but I think the new way that I would go about doing this is at the start of the fight, when players go into the arena, they start with a buff called like Ahamkara Slayer or something like it. It's like 0 stacks, and that will affect the amount of damage you can do to Riven. And then make it so every time you complete the eye sequence, you get a stack of that, so your damage goes up. So you get to the top, you've done the eye sequence twice. So now when you're doing the 6 eye shooting thing, you can get more stacks. So every 2 eyes you shoot, you get a stack. So it goes higher and higher and higher. Then you complete a whole cycle, and then make it so based on the number of crit spots you hit, that stack goes even higher. So the point being, make players complete at least 1 cycle for sure. And then maybe by the time they get down, they have enough stacks to just finish the boss right there. But the whole thing here is that make people actually do the raid the way it was intended to be done. No more of this free loot stuff. Like, I know people are just doing this because they want the loot, But really, this is just as bad as the pulling the Ethernet cable in Crota days. That's how bad this is. It needs to be removed from the game. So please fix the fight. I don't care how many people say it shouldn't be fixed. It needs to be fixed. Finally, Scourge. Not much needs to happen there. I think Scourge was done rather well. Just follow suit with the other weapons. Make the weapons have perks specific to the raid itself. The only complaint I have about Scourge is that you copy and pasted the mods from Last Wish and just took the word taken out and put the word fallen in. That is incredibly lazy, and don't do that. Please actually take the time and make something pertinent to the raid itself. So that kind of covers my thoughts on the state of Destiny 2 right now. So this is for February 19. Obviously we have Season of the Drifter coming up with Joker's Wild, and I'm hoping that some things change, but I think for the most part the changes I'm talking about here require more time and effort to fix, but these are things that have to happen. They need to make the game better for the long-term pursuits, like make the game not feel stale or I only want to play on Tuesdays. Because as I mentioned, if Joker's Wild follows the same feeling as Black Armory, people are going to get burned out really quickly, and with other titles coming out, this game's going to go downhill pretty quickly. So that's all I got for today. Hope you followed along. If you agree, if you don't agree, just talk about it. And let's get the conversation going on this. That's something that needs to happen, and something that should be talked about a bit more. That's all I got. See you guys later.